It doesn't matter what your avoidant partner tells you. If they are giving you the silent treatment, storming out, going AWOL for days or weeks at a time with no explanation, they are emotionally abusing you. And if you're left feeling obsessed and frantic for little crumbs of communication from them, I'm going to send you a lifeline to tell you your trauma wounds have been activated. And from here on out, it's going to be very hard to find any peace or happiness unless the whole dynamic of your relationship changes. Now, I'm not a therapist, and what I'm going to tell you about stonewalling can't take the place of professional help. But I am someone who learned how to heal this toxic relationship dynamic in my own life, both sides of it, so that real love and trust can grow. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Brinn, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I think I've developed a trauma bond with my boyfriend due to his habit of stonewalling after arguments. I want to make sense of whether I'm being a little delusional for still trying to make the relationship work despite these toxic patterns." All right, I've got my pink fairy pencil here. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's go through Brinn's letter and hear what's going on. I'm 26 years old, and I've been in an on and off relationship with my 42-year-old boyfriend for 2 years now. The relationship is amazing. He would give me so much attention, message me often, and organize road trips for us. The greatest problem for us is how we handle conflict. A fight will always start off with me being moody. I am a naturally really bubbly person, but when I get hungry or had a long day or week, etc., I can get quiet and snappy. He would sense my mood change and immediately get very angry and defensive. He blames me for ruining his peace and bringing negativity into his day, claiming that whatever is causing me to be upset is not worth it. This causes my emotions to become dysregulated, and we end up in a fiery fight with yelling and me crying. And after the fight, he would become quiet for days. He would ignore all my calls and messages or attempts to talk. During the stonewalling, I get really upset and desperate. I'm also always the one who reaches out and apologizes. After we reconcile, it's almost like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders and like the fight never happened. We go back to normal, really loving, etc., until the next fight. And toward the end of the first year, the fights became more frequent and would end up in him saying we should break up. But we would always reconcile. And one time he went silent for a month and a half. Oh. Eventually, I took it as a sign to move on. I started seeing someone else. The boyfriend came back and begged for me to go back to him. He promised he would change and that he won't stonewall again. So I went back to him. In the beginning, he tried hard to change, but as time went on, the fights started happening again, and so did the silent treatment. He rationalizes that it takes him a long time to process his emotions and to calm down again. We'll come back to that. He had a very rough upbringing, and I think he has a lot of childhood trauma. His dad died when he was very young. His mom often neglected him due to work commitments, and at 16, he was kicked out of home by his stepfather due to a misunderstanding. He doesn't really have a lot of close friends or family, so I don't think he has a lot of support outside of me. I find the stonewalling very hard to tolerate. I end up so consumed by my thoughts that I get very upset. I can't focus on anything but trying to resolve the argument. I know he loves me a lot, and I love him a lot too. And friends and family advise me to leave because of the stonewalling and how it affects me. But I can't seem to do it. I think I may have developed a trauma bond, and I can't get out of this cycle of highs and lows. I'm not sure if it's the trauma bond talking, but I really want the relationship to work, despite all the highs and lows that it has brought me over the last 2 years. Outside of the stonewalling, he is sweet, caring, and funny guy. I would really appreciate if I could get your opinion on this, fairy. Many thanks. Brinn. All right. Yeah, I think I can help here. So I'm just going to go through and read some things you told me, Brinn. First of all, there's a big age difference, which is interesting. You're 26, he's 42. You've been together for 2 years. The relationship is amazing, so much attention, but the conflict comes up. So I'm guessing that what he is somebody with an avoidant attachment style. that he doesn't have very good workarounds for. And I'm not trying to excuse it, because I said at the beginning of this video, stonewalling and refusing to speak to somebody and just ghosting them like that, it's emotional abuse. And I would say any one of those like really hurtful behaviors that he did is justification enough for you to end the relationship. No matter how you rationalize what he did, it comes down to, how does it affect you? Is this relationship lifting you up into an even better version of yourself than you would be without him? And the answer is no, it's tearing you apart. So right there, that is the writing on the wall. You know, sometimes people, where there's an avoidant in the relationship, and you didn't tell me anything about your background, but maybe you have an insecure attachment style. Maybe you've done this before, where you've become very attached to somebody who jerks you around, who withdraws love from you, and maybe you develop that. It's not uncommon that people who were like had an alcoholic parent, for example, like I did, you know, they'll be totally great one day, and then later that day, they're totally absent. They're angry at you for no reason. They're not taking care of you. There's no food. So we get primed by that kind of treatment to get into this type of relationship and tolerate it as adults. But it can happen at any time. A trauma bond, you've correctly described it. It's the other word for it is intermittent reinforcement. So you can intentionally manipulate somebody, and this is done like in hostage situations and torture of prisoners, where you give them all kinds of kindness and love. You're great, you're great, you're great, and then you yank it away. And then you give it back and you yank it away, and it's kind of random, and you'll leave the person thinking, oh, somehow I caused this. It must have been because I had a bad day or whatever. And, you know, I don't doubt that maybe you get moody, or maybe you have bad days and you're difficult and it's unpleasant for him, but it's that he stonewalls you. So we'll talk about avoidance and what they can do in a minute. This can happen at any time, and I have just noticed that even rats get it, even dogs get intermittent reinforcement reactions, where they become trauma bonded, where I often use this analogy. If you've ever seen like a shelter dog who gets treated very badly and simultaneously will wag its tail and make a little smile like love me, but they're like peeing on the floor. And I'm not saying you're peeing on the floor. Whenever I use this analogy, I want to say that. And I'm not saying you're a dog, but I'm just saying it's not that we're crazy, it's that we're living things, we're creatures. And the attachment is, the urge to attach to people, and the mechanism in our nervous system for doing that is so strong that it will kick on even stronger sometimes when the love is periodically taken away for random reasons. And it's very unfortunate. I think that people who were not traumatized as kids have a little bit more immunity to it. They can sort of, like if somebody, you know, jerks them around, or you know, just blames them for everything and takes off and doesn't speak to them for a month and a half, they wouldn't want to take that person back. They would go, that's terrible. I want to be with somebody who's totally there for me, who will explain to me when they're frustrated, where we can talk it out, which is what I know you want that too. But what I see is that you are not able to stand up for what you want and need, and what anybody would want and need. And there's this like very bad estimation of yourself that's developing in your consciousness because of this. And you know, why is that? I've read books by psychologists who say it's because kids blame themselves for their parents' lack of love or neglect and take it on themselves. Maybe you had that, but whatever happened when you were a kid and whatever hasn't been healed from that, you still need a workaround today to take care of present day Brinn, of 26-year-old Brinn, who's in a relationship with a guy who makes you feel terrible and feeling like you can't leave. Like you decide to leave, your friends and family say leave, but you feel like you can't. So yes, trauma bond. And also there's a word for when you can't leave, and it's often, it's something that the therapist Pete Walker just calls abandonment melange. So if there was a real abandonment in your past, sometimes there's an intense emotional reaction that's bigger than the average person. I don't know if that happened in your past, or this is surely from psychological torture of the on-again, off-again relationship. And it doesn't sound like it was you who kept turning it off. You kept allowing it to come back on. And I think that psychologically there is a part of us that can't, We just can't really rationalize that unless we believe that we did something wrong and will be so good that we can stop it from happening again. But the evidence is here. It just keeps happening. So if you're asking my opinion, Brinn, yeah, I think this is not great. Stonewalling is a terrible thing. Now, if he wanted to, and you can tell him this if you want, but I would encourage you not to make it your life project to make him change if he's not interested. But a person with avoidant attachment style is often somebody who is a bit introverted or who needs some downtime and alone time and gets overwhelmed when somebody else is emotional, right? Which some of us are. They get overwhelmed and they don't have very good tools for how to gracefully handle that, to go, I'm sorry you're feeling really bad. I do care. I will talk to you about this, but could I take a break? I'm just feeling kind of overwhelmed right now. Or they can come up with more veiled ways of saying it, like, could I just take a pause? I'm about to go meditate, and then we can talk about this. There's a kind and loving way to take your leave from somebody who is being overwhelming, if you want a relationship with them. So I'm saying for anybody who's the avoidant one here, or who's stonewalling. And stonewalling is, I learned about it from the really good work of the Gottman Institute. The Gottmans are a married couple who came up with this. It's a model for how to communicate in a relationship. And I think it's the best thing I've found out there. And my husband and I find it helpful, even though we can't really do it perfectly. But it's a really good idea. And they call it the 4 horsemen for ruining relationships. And it is complaints, criticism, contempt, and stonewalling. So stonewalling is a big enough deal that it's right up there with contempt. And they have observed that in couples that have been together for whatever amount of time, they can predict if there's contempt, that's the most toxic one, that if they're doing that, the relationship may not have much time left. And so if you're having any of those 4 behaviors going on and they're hurting the other person, it's time to change it. So if your boyfriend cares to change it, he could take a look into this. You guys could look at the Gottman thing. But here's what we do. We do all the reading. We buy the books. We write to the Crappy Childhood Fairy for but he's the one who's doing this. Maybe you have a problem that you want to work on. But at this point, it doesn't matter what your issues are, because if somebody is just like running away from you and not speaking to you for a month and a half, that is not the one for you. And our healing doesn't, we don't have to get with the perfect person to heal. And we don't have to be healed to get into a good relationship. They tend to happen together. And sometimes we're going to have some relationships that don't work out very well along the way. And it's so painful when you had childhood trauma. It's so, just so destructive to the order in your life to have a relationship end. That's the abandonment melange. But it has to happen. It has to happen if we're going to be okay. And so to be okay, we have to find a way to leave relationships that are no good. And there's a little step in between absolutely leaving and slamming the door. There's stepping away and allowing information to come to you rather than running around and apologizing, sorry, it was me, please can we talk? When somebody hurts you, you can let go and you can move on. Sometimes you might even have to fake it that you've moved on, because you'll want to call. There's that natural inclination, like, let me just get this fired up again. Maybe I can make it work. Maybe if I blame myself enough or read the right book or get him to read the right book. It's not ideal. You want to find somebody who actually just you feel pretty good with them, and having them in your life has definitely made life better. That's the dream. That's what we're going for. And if somebody's showing you again and again that they cannot do that for you, they're showing you what the rest of your life would be like if you stay. And I have a feeling, though, that somebody like this boyfriend of yours wouldn't stay anyway. Like, sooner or later, he's going to have to leave. But who knows? Maybe he's willing to work on it. Whether he does or he doesn't, here's what I'm going to recommend to you, Brinn. You need a great life. You need a life that's fun and full of love and connection and things to do on weekends, so that you never have to tolerate icky behavior and bad treatment from anybody. The minute you feel like, I'd be happier just hanging out with my friends this weekend, you have infinite riches. You have this great protection from having to put up with terrible treatment from anybody. You have somewhere to go. And I can't tell you enough what a big difference that makes. The trouble with relationships that are trauma-driven is we probably went into them kind of not that connected to other people. But once we have a significant other, we're like, oh, phew, I can stop trying to have connections with other people. I don't know if that's true for you, but it was for me. And that's a key component to have a good relationship, is to have many good relationships at the same time. I don't mean dating, but I mean friends and people you do fun things with and care about, and they care about you. And a nice place to meet people is in any kind of thing where people are working together to try to make their lives better. If it's all along the same lines, like in a 12-step program, great. Or the membership program that I lead, we have like 2,000 people there. They're all working on healing trauma symptoms, and maybe half of them, the trauma definitely affects the way they're dating or having relationships. So they support each other in that. There are therapy groups, there are meetups, but maybe those are a little bit anonymous. There are friend groups of people who do this. What's not helpful is connecting with people, friends who are very opinionated and have difficulties in their own life. The best person to get support from is somebody who's really committed to their own healing. Maybe they're in a really healthy relationship that you admire right now. Maybe they're single, but they're not in a sick relationship, because there's just, when we are in a sick relationship, and I totally say we, because I've been in them, when you're in one, it's very hard to think clearly, and it's very easy to project on other people and go, oh, you should get out. Men are horrible. That's not helpful when you're trying to figure yourself out. So much of healing is about coming to your own answer. So that's why I also say you need tools. You need tools that help you be very attuned to yourself and hear that small voice of like, who are you really? What do you really want in your life? What do you really want in the relationship you eventually have? What does that feel like, being with that hypothetical person? Is this anything like that? Like if you're in the middle of constant drama and trauma, you don't have access to that still small voice that reminds you of who you are and what's right for you. So it's really easy to just get jerked around like a bull with a ring in its nose. I'll just go wherever the pain stops for 5 minutes, even if it's going to hurt me more. You know what I mean? So with that, if you think that you are vulnerable to romantic manipulation from somebody who jerks you back in all the time and then gets rid of you, I have a list of things that romantic manipulators do that you can keep in your purse or in your pocket with you when you go out, to try to teach yourself not to fall for it anymore, to hold your boundaries with that. It's a free download. I've got it for you right here, and I will see you very soon.